Hello, friends. Welcome. Welcome, everyone, to this special webinar, Meeting the Psychedelic Moment, Promises and Pitfalls. My name's Tami Simon. I'm the founder of Sounds True, and it is my great delight to be your host for this special webinar. We'll be featuring in this webinar Sean Lawlor. Sean is a writer and researcher in the psychedelic field. He's the author of a forthcoming book with Sounds True. It's called The Psychedelic Revival Toward a New Paradigm of Healing. Sean is a psychedelic therapist providing ketamine-assisted therapy and psychedelic integration counseling. And he's also the host of Sounds True's new Psychedelic Wisdom Intensive. It's a 3-month online program that's beginning at the end of August. You're welcome to join us, and you'll be learning more about the Psychedelic Wisdom Intensive in this webinar. You can click on the Learn More button that's below the player page, or if you're watching this special webinar on YouTube, we'll put the link in the chat. One of the guest faculty that's part of the Psychedelic Wisdom Intensive is here with us now, Dr. Rosalind Watts. Rosalind is a clinical psychologist, a mother, and a nature lover who has served as the clinical lead for Imperial College London's psilocybin trial. She's named one of the top 16 women shaping the future of psychedelics. What sets Rosalind apart is her focus on integration, harm reduction, and inclusion in the psychedelic space. She builds tools and structures that foster connectedness after psychedelic experience, the most recent of which is the ACER integration community. And you'll also be learning more about the ACER integration community as part of our webinar today. Rosalind, Sean, welcome you two.
Hello.
Hi, thanks, Tami. Hello, everyone.
Meeting the psychedelic moment. That's the moment we're in. And I'm sure most people joining us here know that and are trying to understand what's happening right now in our world, that so many people are interested in psychedelics. At the same time, it seems to be a confusing space. I'm curious to start off to hear from both of you. And Rosalind, maybe we'll start with you. How do you see this moment we're in when it comes to the rising interest in psychedelics?
Well, it's been an interesting thing to observe because it feels like it's been so quick, but of course these ways of working have been happening for thousands of years. And I guess in the Western history, a few decades ago, there was an amazing mental health kind of revolution with using psychedelics, but then of course they became illegal. And then the kind of resurgence that we're seeing now feels like it's come like a kind of tidal wave. There feels like there's so much force behind it. And I guess my understanding of why that is because the disconnectedness that we are living with is becoming more intense. People are feeling it more. There's more of a mental health crisis. There's more of a sense that we are cut off from nature. And very importantly, right now, there is this awareness of this moment that we are in. It feels to me like it's defined by one of a kind of grief around our planet. And psychedelics can be very helpful with connecting people to nature and connecting people with this sense of being part of an interconnected web of life. So there is this hope and this sense that psychedelics can bring connectedness, and that's the medicine that we also desperately need. So I think they're coming in at this time because people have tried other things. There aren't that many other effective mental health treatments at the moment. And so it's coming at this time of like real necessity that we realize that, we need a revolution, and psychedelics seem like they could offer the kind of revolution that we need.
Sean?
I agree with everything Rosalind just said. Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think that that revolution that happened in or the early to mid 1900s with the discovery of LSD from Albert Hofmann and the synthesis of mescaline that, really had a whole history of mental health applications and was garnering great interest in the scientific community for decades, and then got pushed underground due to a lot of political factors, the war on drugs, and essentially the research was stopped, but wisdom holders have continued that what was being built at the time of using psychedelics to address a variety of mental health conditions for a lot of people and help a lot of folks feel more connected, feel more restored, and feel more energized with life. And so it continued, and there were efforts amid that time to kind of reverse some of the regulations that got put in place in the early 1970s and 1980s. Probably the most well-known of which is MAPS, who has since 1986 been pushing MDMA to being rescheduled by the FDA to be used in therapeutic settings. And so this wasn't really reported too much, it wasn't covered very much, but so much momentum was being built underground. And then the science that came in kind of presented the findings in ways that people couldn't really ignore anymore, that the general public couldn't ignore. And that was really just fascinating. And I think that there's just, Western materialism and rationalism and kind of the scientific method has brought us so far in so many ways, but still has certain limitations. And I think we're in a moment now where a lot of people are grasping with those limitations, both in themselves and like the medical system and the pharmaceutical medical approach that is pretty dominant in the West. And there's a sense that there's something more, there's something deeper, and psychedelics seem to, for a lot of people, have the ability to kind of catalyze that increased depth and maybe provide a certain missing link that extends beyond the limits of Western rationality.
You mentioned MAPS, Sean, and Rick Doblin, the founder of MAPS, is actually part of our Psychedelic Wisdom Intensive. And I want to share a little bit here at the beginning, my perspective and why Sounds True is launching this new online program, which is I have not taken psychedelics for 40 years, since I was a young person, since I was 20. And I bring to it this true beginner's mind, wanting to help our Sounds True audience take a wisdom-based approach. And a wisdom-based approach means really getting well educated by trusted sources, which is why I'm so glad you're both here to help educate us, along with the faculty that we're bringing together for the Psychedelic Wisdom Intensive, which includes people like Gabor Mate and Dick Schwartz, the founder of IFS, and Jack Kornfield, beloved meditation teacher, Stanislav Grof, one of those people, Sean, who has kept this wisdom tradition alive for decades upon decades, working with holotropic breathwork, and many more. Lama Rod Owens, who's writing a new book with Sounds True on the new saints, bringing forward our deep care into the world. Spring Washam. It's an incredible faculty. And the goal is to bring this wisdom orientation. And I'm curious to hear from both of you here at the start. What do you think creates a quote unquote wisdom orientation? What does that mean?
That is a good question. I think that with psychedelics in particular, there's so much information out there, and there's so much misinformation out there as well. And, they become very popular and, are getting publications in huge magazines, huge newspapers, books. And sometimes the narrative can be a little thin of what they do, and that can set people up for false expectations or kind of overhyped expectations. And So I think wisdom has a lot to do with navigating all of that information and kind of honing in on what is important and what is factual, and kind of creating a realistic viewpoint on what psychedelics are, which at the same time kind of necessitates an honoring of mystery, because we'll never know exactly what they are or what they do, and there's an inherent unpredictability in taking them. But approaching with care as well, and patience, rather than kind of rushing in from, a really great impulse that, likely has a lot of hope in it, but kind of being able to recognize that and pause and be intentional about how one approaches it. And Rosalind, I know you've written about kind of the hype of psychedelics and some of the drawbacks to that. So I don't know if you'd like to touch on that or any other aspects of the wisdom.
Yes, absolutely. And I think I so agree with what you said as well, Sean, about, the wisdom of kind of being careful. And I think there is so much, because as I was saying before, this kind of hunger for something that can help us, hunger for this new way, something that can be really powerful and work fast. That's really understandable, that yearning for something that can really, we want to change our world, we want to change the way we live, we want to change ourselves. And it's so understandable that we kind of latch on to something that does, in a way, work very quickly. Because as a clinical psychologist, I worked for years with people, many sessions of talking therapy, and you're just talking around the kind of problems. And there's that idea from Einstein of no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. So the frustration of people when they're really suffering and nothing is shifting. And then the experience of being a session guide and sitting with somebody who has had therapy for 10 years and their depression has remained pretty much the same. And then in one day they sit there and they have a breakthrough, they feel this incredible experience of shifting out of their normal kind of the confines of the way they see the world, and feeling love and feeling hope and feeling like they understand what life is about. It's so amazing to observe that. And it's amazing for people to experience it and tell their families that it does make sense, that there is this sense of force and pace and let's put LSD in the drinking water of all the world leaders, and that kind of force of like, let's do this. But absolutely, the wisdom is, I feel, deeper roots, stronger branches. And that if we can, the way I see it is that, this is our chance now. And that if we can really build the structures, the infrastructure around this work, then we can build those deep roots and strong branches that can hold the vast range of experiences that can come, and that many of us feel unprepared for, unschooled in. And indeed we are, because we've been in the West, we've been cut off from our lineage of plant medicine using traditions. And many of us are so thirsty for ceremony and sitting around the fire together and working in this deeper way. But we are cut off from a lineage. We don't have teachers, we don't have the elders, we haven't learned it from our grandmothers. So we do need to rebuild in the West, we need to build a lineage to make sure that the container is strong. And I think from this, the other thing that I was thinking when you asked Tami about, what's wisdom, I was thinking about how so often the lessons of psychedelic therapy, the insights that people come to, seem to resonate so much with the indigenous worldview from different indigenous groups around the world, about the interconnectedness of all things, about our connection to nature, and about really coming out of that very individualistic mindset of competition and coming back into something that's more collaborative and in balance and slower and more full of humility, and living in balance with nature's rhythms as well. So I suppose it's like, how can we be wise enough by knowing what we don't know, and knowing the limits to our worldview in the West, and the limits of what science can show, but also the incredible gift of evidence-based practice. And how can we kind of weave together our own way of building something really strong and really safe, because ultimately I think, you know, it's that safety. Wisdom to me feels like a big old wise tree that is safe and you can sit down next to and you can lean back against, and you know it will hold you. Whereas the kind of the tree, the bamboo that shoots up very fast, you sit back against it and it kind of, you know, falls over. So it's deep roots is what, for me, is what wisdom is.